name's Greg, and welcome to Wargaming World, and welcome to Wargaming World Solo. This is the rule set that came out about 2 weeks ago, and last week I put out a video for a how to play video, just a get started piece, and incredibly we've had more than 1,000 people have watched the rules, and the feedback's just been amazing. So thanks very much to everybody who's come back to me with all the thoughts and ideas, etc. So one of the questions that I was asked during this week is the rule set just a skirmish game? And no, it certainly isn't. You can play enormous battles with it. So the idea is that you play with 10 units, and it can be of any size. So any size in terms of your tabletop, and any size in terms of the number of figures you want to bring out. This particular video that I'm doing today is a continuation of last week, and is a World War II game. So it's 1942 in North Africa. We've got German forces and British forces, and I'll play through that game just to show you how the rules work. But one of the questions I had during the week is to say, okay, well, if we're going to play a larger game, what do we want to look at? So I put out back to Wargaming World Solo on the Facebook group which period. So I suggested whether you wanted the Zulu War or English Civil War, and if you want to come back to me with your thoughts, then feel free, and I'll play a game based on what you want. Okay, so just before I go into this game now, I just wanted to mention that it's been fantastic where the books have been sold. People have been feeding back really, great thoughts. So from Newcastle to New Jersey, I had really fantastic feedback from people who are now starting to play the game. Just to mention that on April 13, Caliber Books will be at Salute 51 in London, and if you want to pick up the game from there, you can do, and naturally you can pick it up from Caliber Books directly, or indeed if you want to go on the Wargaming World website, so that's wargamingworld.net, there's a link there and you can pick it up there as well. So thanks to everybody who's just helping to drive across this whole solo wargaming, and let's get on with this game. In the first video I talked about chapters 1 to 7. We're moving up now into chapter 8, which is the game turn sequence. We always start in terms of my unit, that is the solo player. So I go first in a turn, and it's an I go, you go system. And the first thing is unit activation, to understand about how many units can be activated in that particular phase. As an element of the uncertainty aspect, we get one roll. I've got 10 units, but I can only use what I get off 1d6 plus some additional factors. And in this case, we've still got the virtual U as a marker, so I get a +2, and then I've got the enemy hasn't fired. It takes me up to 4. Now my command unit can issue an order. That would be a +1 if I want to use it, and because I'm the attacking force, I get another +1. So effectively I've got +5, plus the commander can issue an order, and then this roll. So +5, plus this roll, and then the command if necessary, but I've got a 6. So effectively all units can move forward. Okay, well, just before we do any of the movement or use of the amount of options we've got, the two chapters, chapter 10 is about random events, and chapter 11 is about flank and reserve units. Now we would work that through first of all if necessary, so that's after that sort of activation phase. But for the Germans, we don't have any flank or reserve units, so we go just back to random events and see whether we have anything that happens just before any further activity. Random events take place when we roll a 6. So for this activity, no, there's no random events take place here. And we skip past the VY activity, which we'll come back to when we're doing that in their phase. And so just to mention about movement here, is that it's very general, so you can use specifics when you're using a particular period that you're most comfortable with, but in terms of the activity here, we're going to say tanks are going to move 12 inches, and then we've got our standard infantry that are moving 6 inches forward. So this is where we've got to. We've got the German tanks advancing, infantry behind it, so they've all advanced, all 10 units. Importantly though, none of them have moved in such a way that they detect the British markers, which are still, if you remember, at the back here behind buildings and by the station. The sort of carriage and crane is in the way as well, so it can't be seen, and so that effectively means that it is the end of the German phase. So now we turn to the British markers. You'll see the one at the back there on the left hand side of the screen is a cautious marker. The one further forward is measured, and over on the right hand side here there is another cautious marker. So the forces are looking to defend the area, but we still don't know what the battle plan is. We haven't drawn that yet, and of course we've then got barriers in the way here, and that's the reason why the Germans, as they've advanced, haven't seen the British as yet. So let's see how these units operate. We turn back to chapter 12 in terms of movement of the marker, and it's pretty simple. At the top there, we're moving, if we have markers which are moving forward, which is the bold unit, which would be 12 inches, measured 9, and cautious 6. Now I'll try and show you from above that the two markers to the left hand side, the cautious ones, are still out of sight really to the Germans, but the one in the front of it is the measured unit, and that line of sight from where this is, I would argue realistically can be seen potentially by the German tanks as approaching. So therefore let's see what we do next. Well, it couldn't really be any simpler. We just need to roll 1d6. We've got 3 markers, so if I roll a 1 or 2, then the British are detected in that position. They aren't, so all I do is remove that figure. And what we know now is that the British troops, either of those 2 markers there, are cautious units. So that's how the British are going to be operating in terms of their approach. So cautious and defensive, and in this particular area. Also, you'll note we didn't roll for a random event, and that doesn't take place while we've just got markers on the table, not for the virtual U in this phase. So that effectively means it's the end of the second turn, and we move to the third turn. Remember, all of the units were operating in the last turn. Let's see about the roll this time. Remember, we've got a +5 to this roll, and then potentially 1 command operation. So effectively it gives us 8 units can operate, and if we use the command we would be at 9. Just 1 or 2 which aren't going to move. Do anything? Is there a random event? No, there's not. All I've done is to move all of the German infantry behind the tanks, so the tanks didn't get too far ahead, and we turn to the British. So I've moved the markers straight forward. The one furthest away is still obscured, but this one isn't. So I'm going to say that we're going to roll and see whether the British are here in this area, and once we detect them, we'll see what the battle plan is. This time it is a 1 to 3. It's a 5, so it's not. Right. So we now know that the British marker and the British troops are in this area, around the station and up to this building. So that means they're not occupying this area, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their battle plan doesn't look for them to hold this area. So let's just find out first of all, what is the battle plan that we're going to have for the virtual U. Well, these were the 3 plans, so let's roll and see which one might be the one we pick. So it's going to be the second of the 3. So if we go back to that, and let's see how we adapt that. So the argument here was to defend the market square, and the Chief of Staff with it, ensure that the agent can't fall into the enemy hands, and use the boat to evacuate if necessary. Hold armour in reserve. Now if that's the plan, I'm going to feel that the British are caught a little bit on the hop. So I'm going to set up their defensive position in a moment, so I'll show you what that looks like. And then the thought is that perhaps the British need to move over in this direction a little to hold the market square. And importantly, we also know that there's going to be an agent in the area that the British are looking to try and defend. When I referred to the boat, it's over here, so this is the escape route as well. So hopefully I can set up a good game, an interesting game, and see how we develop. So I'll set the British up here to conclude turn 3. Okay, so we've now got the British set up. We have a platoon. We've got 2 sections at the back there. We've got a machine gun team up on the roof. We've got the platoon commander and the AT rifle, the boys rifle, there with them. And then we have the second platoon with 2 sections, at the one taking cover, getting as much cover as it can from this crane, and the other right at the back there by the station. So we've got 6 units. We have 2 tanks that can appear in terms of reserve, so we'll see whether they come in at some point in the game. And you'll notice that they all have the red Wargaming World dice, because they're all cautious. So if during the game, and we'll have to test it each time, whether they change to measured or bold, so we'll have blue dice for measured and green dice for bold. But that effectively is the end of this turn, so we're over to the Germans for the next turn. Just one last thing. I did mention that we're in 1942 and the war could go either way. So there is a situation where agents are of real value, and some kind of negotiation has been taking place in this market square, and the British intelligence is here looking to try and make sure it can get the best out of an individual. So we have to protect that group and see whether the British can either evacuate them one way or the other, or hold the Germans off at the station. Now things very much have changed because the Germans are advancing, but now they can see that we've got British forces massing. They didn't detect the 2 markers first of all, so obviously that left the 3rd, but now as the British deploy, we can assume therefore that the British have moved. They're in sight, and we'll see how the Germans react. So because we can see them, we don't get a +2 in terms of the Germans, so we will definitely have less units operating. Let's see what they do and how many can operate. So we've got 3 from the roll. So 3 from the roll. Enemy hasn't fired, so that gives us 5 units to operate. We get +1 for an attack, so that's 6. And then whether the commander can issue an order. So just to clarify what that means is that sometimes the commander will be further than 6 inches away, and therefore will only be able to use himself in terms of a command, but he's within 6 inches, so he could issue his command, sort of gift his command to one of the other units if he so wishes. So effectively that means we've got 7 units to operate. Some will move, but some can fire. Just before we do anything else, is there a random event? No, there's not. Movement. I've moved this tank forward. I've moved a squad behind it, so that's 2. And then over here I've moved all 3 squads forward, so that's 5 in total, leaving me 2 options. So I'm going to fire with the tank and with the mortar. I'm going to say that the tank's going to fire here at this machine gun. Really it's firing at the building with an expectation that somebody's going to be there, and I'm going to say the mortar's going to fire at the same target. I'm going to do them separately. You can combine the impact, and therefore I would only need to do 1 subsequent test, but I'm going to do 2 separate shots, so I'll just talk that through. Now, shooting is chapter 15, and we've got I tried to cover quite a lot of different weaponry, but when we're looking at the tanks and mortars, we count it as artillery, and thereafter we're looking at 48 inches to hit, and it's always counted as close range. Now, that's significant because if we were firing at extreme range, then it would only have half effect. So that's not the case here, so it'll be a full effect, but the target is behind hard cover, so we can see that that says +2. So what does that mean? That means is that we've got the first Panzer that's firing, and the 9 is the indicator of its standard, its morale standard, so it's good quality troops, but we need to roll 2d6 to hit, and it's going to be a +2, so effectively you need to get a 7 or less to hit. 7 or less. It's a 9, so that's a miss. Now, despite the fact that it missed, I just want to mention as well that it's a heavy weapon, so if it hits, you'll see where it says 1.75, it has a greater impact. We'll see if it hits next time. It's the mortar that's going to fire next. Now it's an 8, so again +2, so it's a 6 or less to hit, and you'll see it's a 1.25, so effectively it's a light effect, and we'll see whether it hits and what that means. It has hit. Now we've hit for the first time in this game, and you'll see there it says -1 for a light unit firing. So that effectively means that it's more ineffective, or less effective I should say, in terms of the casualties it inflicts. I'll also point out as well is that there's a -2 for hard cover. So with the British machine gun team, you'll see its morale standard is 7, so it's not as high as it could be. We've got hard cover, and we've then got a light unit firing at it. So effectively, it takes 3 from the effectiveness of the rolls. So just bear in mind we're on 7 at the moment. We roll 1d6 for the impact of the mortar. So it's a 6. We take 3 from it. So we had the hard cover, and it was a light impact, as it were. So that's 3. So then we have the morale standard of the British, which is 7. We take 3 from it to leave 4. And we roll 2d6 and see whether we get 4 or less, or whether it's impacted by this firing. So 4 or less for the British. It's not. It's 8, so we are 4 above. So now we switch to chapter 17, which is the morale, and what is the impact of 4 above in terms of the impact? So we look at this table, and 1 to 4 means that that unit needs to reform. So what does reform mean? That gives us the detail here. Gives a little ground, needs to move halfway directly away from the enemy. What I'm going to say is that this unit goes through that trapdoor, and it's going to go inside into the building after being hit by the mortar. Now, all units have leaders, as you know. So therefore we need to test, has that leader been hit in that shot from the mortar? And just before I test that, you can also have specialists in your units. Now I haven't included it within this game, but what we're going to do is we're going to draw a card, and it would be possible to be hit as a specialist too. Now what do I mean by specialist? It means, for example, you could have medics, and what that would do is it would add elements of different characteristics to a particular unit. So let's just stick on this for a second and have a look and see whether the leader has been hit. And where you find this is on chapter 5. So on chapter 5, when we look at characters, leaders, etc., it's this particular table, so it's 5.4. Let's draw a card and see whether there has been actually any particular impact of that firing. What do we get? It's a 4. So nothing's happened. Alright, I'll just put these figures on one side, just to note that I don't tend to remove figures from the table unless they're completely routed, so we can see as many figures as possible in any given game. So it's the end of the German activity, over to the British. Now, it's over to the British in their phase. Naturally, I can't make a choice in terms of which units would operate, so I don't roll a d6 and say this is the amount of units that can activate. Instead, we need to look at that very differently. So let's take a look at that in chapter 14. This is really the unique nature of Wargaming World Solo, how we operate with the virtual you, their decision making, the engine of that, and how we go about it. So let me talk you through. Now I've got 6 units, and we're going to test their activation to see what approach they will still follow. Remember, all 6 of them are cautious at the moment, so they will follow cautious approaches and cautious decisions, which we've got on various tables. But let's see whether they maintain that cautious approach. We do that by testing the morale standard of each of the units. Let's start here. We've already seen that the morale standard of this unit is 7. Will they stay cautious? No, they don't. So they won't be cautious. So temporarily they move to one of two things. They either become bold or measured. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, they become bold. No, they become measured. This unit temporarily for the next phase will become measured. It means that perhaps they'll be, their blood is up. Maybe they'll get back up on top of the roof to fire back, because rather than be cautious, they want to be more attacking. We don't know that yet, and we'll have to test that into the next phase. But certainly what they can't do is they can't do anything in this particular phase itself, as they aren't following their standard approach. Let's test second platoon. The units are 8 and 9 in terms of their standards respective. First of all, that's fine. 9. That's fine too. Platoon HQ with the anti-tank gun is an 8. It's an 11. That's a fail. It goes bold. Yes, it does. Now the impact for that unit is that it means it can't do anything in this phase, and we'll need to retest in the next phase. So it means even though it could fire, it won't, because it hasn't passed that test. So we'll see whether it stays permanently bold in the next phase, or whether it goes back to its original cautious state. All right, let's just test out the last two, which is these two platoon. This single platoon with 2 sections. The front is a 7. That's fine. It's at the back is an 8. It's fine also. So effectively, I can now operate with 4 of those 6 units. But there are 2 things that need to be tested beforehand before we do anything there. Remember, we've got a random event, but also we've got to remember the fact that also the British have potential reserves. So do the reserves come onto the table? I'm going to test the random event. Do we get a 6? No, we don't. This is the chapter we need to have a look at with regards to the British reserves, which are 2 Matilda 2 tanks. Right, see if we get any reserves. First thing we need to do is to draw a card. Number, we're going to have nothing will happen. What do we get? It's a 5, so nothing for this phase. So we go back to chapter 14, and the next thing to do is to say, well, okay, what do cautious units do in terms of their plan? And so this is where we begin to look at the table over here. Now all those units, those 4 units we were talking about, they were all cautious. So the next question then is to say, if they're all cautious, we need to have an understanding about what the enemy looks like. So is the enemy in the open? Is it in cover? Is it outclassed or untouchable? So if I was, for example, a unit just with rifles, then if I'm looking out and looking at a Panzer IV, it's untouchable. So I would make a decision there. However, a lot of the units that we've got, so it's the unit which, for example, is by the crane. It's looking down at a target, potentially, that is out in the open. So I could make a decision there. And as for the other 3, well, the other 3 units, I don't think they can see the Germans at all. So it's a question of saying whether they move forward. So if we go back to the table, we can say that when the enemy is in the open, I need to draw another card. And effectively, as long as I don't draw a joker, I can fire at the German target. In terms of the remainder, i.e. the units which, well, they could move if they wish, I can just effectively just make a judgment call about whether each of those units would move or would they stay in their cautious position. And based on the battle plan, I think we can make a judgment which means that the 2 units which are over by the station can potentially move towards the market. That's the plan that we want to follow. Whereas the unit at the back there, I think it would stay in a more cautious position and stay with the defensive position that it's in with the sandbags, etc. In fact, as I think about it, I think I'd probably make the same conclusion with the sandbag there. So I'm just going to move the unit at the back, move it towards the market, because that was the plan. And if I can, I'm going to see if I can fire with the unit that's behind the crane. This is the unit that's firing. It's got a morale standard of 7. Unit that I'm firing at, it's in the open. So there are no pluses. The unit is at extreme range, and therefore I don't get a benefit even though the unit's in the open, and it's also going to be half effect if I manage to hit it. I was thinking of table 14.5 before I fire. I just need to make sure I don't draw a joker, and I don't. Morale standard is 7. It is a hit though, so let's see what the effect is. We're going to half it. If we roll a 1, it's still a 1, so there's a minimum of a 1 in terms of the impact. It's a 6 though, so 3 is the impact. Now the morale standard of this unit is a 9. 9 less 3 is a 6. There's a 9 though, so it's 3 over. Right, I'm just going to show you something else we could play here. This unit is, it was a 9. It took 3 for its casualties. So that took us to a 6, and we went over by 3. So if you look at the unit itself, it is the 2nd Platoon 3rd Squad, and its morale is 9 there. But if you take a note at the end, so the final column says 9 in terms of its characteristics. It means that it can use this once in a game. And what is 9? So 9 here is to take cover. -1 to enemy impact from firing. Now I could use that at any time in the game, and you can see where this is in chapter 5 of the rulebook. Gives sort of some generic ideas about how we use this in the game, and how and why would that be beneficial. Well, I know if we're going to take that hit now, the unit will just move back. It won't really impact it very much, but we'll have to take a test and see whether the leader is hit. So I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to say, yep, we'll take the hit. I won't use that card in this particular part of the game, but we'll have to test whether the leader has been hit from that firing. I have a separate deck for my cards. It's a 10. It means there's no leader killed, and the unit falls back there. And in line with the battle plan, we've got the first unit moving across towards the market square, and that effectively is the end of the phase for the virtual U and this turn. Now, in contrast to the way I've done the game so far, I just thought I'd run very quickly through a turn. This turn I actually only had 4 units I could move, and I didn't have a random event, so I moved simply these 3 units here, the platoon with 3 squads, and then also I moved up a machine gun team just beyond that tank there. So that was the 4 units I could move for my force. For the British, I didn't have any reserves move up or a random event, and therefore when I looked at the 6 units, the unit in front, the machine gun team, it again failed, and therefore it stayed as measured. So if you fail twice in a row, you will move permanently to that new approach. On the left hand side, it's the 2nd Platoon's 2nd section, and this time it was moving in the last phase, but this time it failed. I got a 10, and therefore temporarily it's now measured. We were fine in terms of this unit, but this unit is cautious and it's staying in its position. When we look over here, the unit which is the HQ unit, which has the anti-tank there, it again failed, and it means it will be permanently bold for the next turn. The machine gun team failed and went bold temporarily, so we'll have to test them in the next phase. And finally, the other cautious unit at the top left hand corner of your screen was fine. It passed, and it will stay in its cautious defending position, similar to this unit over here. So that was the end of this turn, and it's over to the Germans. A new turn, but the situation doesn't change for me in the sense that I've rolled a terrible 1, and actually my command unit was too far back to send an order, so I've had to use the 1 to move the command unit further forward. And then you also get a +1 in terms of being an attacking force, which this is, so I've only moved this unit further forward. So that's the end of my phase over to the British. First thing we do is going to test the approach of each of the units. So let's start over here. Remember, it is now moved to measured, so whether it will maintain that measured status, I'll just roll for that, and it will. So 8 for the cautious and 9 for that temporarily measured. Cautious unit is fine. If I roll a 9, it goes back to cautious for the other unit, which it does. So I can use these 2 units here, but not that one because I've had to test it. Now I move over to these 3 units. So the anti-tank is, no, that fails again. That's failed every time. So 1 to 3, it'll go cautious, and it does. The machine gun team had gone temporarily bold. Will it remain so? Yes, because it fails again, so that means it's now permanently bold. And the unit at the back was cautious, and it remains so. So the 2 units that are in defensive positions by the sandbags won't move. The only one I'm going to therefore operate with is this measured unit, and I think they're going to move back to the top of the building, but I'll need to draw cards before I'm able to do that. So before we go into the movement element, we need to do 2 things, which is to roll for whether we have a random event, and of course to see whether any reserves come in. Is there a random event? No, there isn't. I need to draw a card in terms of the reserve. King. Now that's something. So we now look at table 11.2. We're a defending force. So we come on the baseline, which we will do. I roll 1d6. If I get a 1, nothing appears. 2 to 4, one of the tanks appears. 5 and 6, both of them will do. Let's see how many. 4, so 1 appears. There we go. I'm going to say that the Matilda's come in via this road. It is actually going in the wrong direction effectively, but it's driving in to give support. And so after that we can move to activity with the it's just going to be this unit, the measured unit, to see if it moves back up to the top of the roof. Again, I'll draw a card. I'm sure it's not something like a joker. It's not. It's a 4. It's absolutely fine. New turn, but the same roll. 1 again has been terrible. So I get 1 plus 1 for the fact that I'm attacking. So I've got to move these 2 squads forward, and I can use 1 command because my commander in the centre is near enough to other troops. But I've asked the unit, or ordered the unit that had originally retreated to move further forward. So just to move closer, so you can see it. That unit at the back there is moving. So I had no random events, but if you think, if I'd have got 6s rather than 1s, I'd have had a huge number of troops now all the way towards the British, but at the moment we've got nothing other than on this left flank. So end of my turn, over to the virtual U. Test the approach, starting with the cautious tank. Carey is the tank commander, and a 9 we need, and passes that. This unit is a 7, and that can do something, so probably fire. 8 for the unit on the right, 9 on the left. The 1 in the defensive position is fine. And that fails again. 1, 2, 3 will be temporarily bold. No, it's measured. This unit is temporarily cautious. If it's an 8, it goes back to bold, or 8 or less. It is 8, so it goes back to bold. Can't do anything with it this turn, but back to bold. So the machine gun team behind it, it's 7 for its leadership. 7 to stay bold. It does, so it can be activated. Finally, the unit at the back. This is an 8. Now that fails. 1, 2, 3 goes bold. No measured. So that goes measured there. So effectively, I can use the infantry team that's behind the crane. I can use the machine gun team on here, and then I can also use the tank, which is in this area. But let's first have a look and see if we get any random events or an additional tank. Do we get a random event? No, we don't. We haven't had any so far. Draw a card. Do we get 9, so nothing appears for a reserve? So how do we use this tank? It's come in and along the road, and the idea is that it's come in, it's cautious, it's going to support the defence of this area. If I'd have turned bold, for example, we might have done something different. We might have approached the attacking Germans, but instead I'm going to draw a card, and unless it's anything other than a joker, it's just going to move to support that infantry. So, get from a card, it's a 9, that's fine. It drives behind that palm tree and towards the centre of the market, so that's fine. So I now look over to this measured and bold unit, and both of these I think are going to fire. Just a reminder that for bold units, measured, whether they are attacking or reconnaissance or defending, and indeed for cautious units, these tables will give you an indicator about what the unit is going to do. Now, you couldn't possibly have every permutation, so what I do is then think about the battle plan, and then think about just a logical way in which the units will operate. So for the unit which is on top of the building over there, this would be the table here. So we're defending, so that's the overarching thing that we're doing. So if we look at an enemy, either, well, really in the open, if really it's going to be anything other than drawing a joker from a card, we would fire at any range at any enemy that is in the open, and that's what they're going to do. Potentially, if the enemy was in cover, we might, if we think it is more advantageous, we might take cover. So that's why those you get two options there to think about what is more logical. But in this situation, like I say, we're going to fire from that building. So the machine gun's firing. It is within 24 inches, which I'm saying is the close range of these units moving. And I know it might be slightly obscured with the other building in front, but I'm going to say it's going to fire at the nearest unit, and it means it is a 7 for this unit to hit. It is a hit. It's not a heavy weapon, so it's just 1d6 for an impact, which is 3. Now, it's the first platoon, second squad. Its morale is 8. Now, I know its characteristic is with an ace, and an ace is a +1 for the first test of a morale standard. So that's this one. So although we've taken a hit of 3, it's effectively, it's at 2. So I'll just see what the impact is. So a standard of 8, we'd normally reduce it down to 5. We're using the card, so it's a 6, so we need to get a 6 or less. And it is a 5, so no impact to the unit. This unit is going to fire, and it's going to fire at this machine gun team, which is in cover. What do we get? It's a 4. So let's see whether we hit or not. That's a 5, so that's a hit. The unit is in soft cover, so it's this roll -1, and then we half it because we've got 6. Well, it's going to be a 3, in fact, because it's at extreme range, so it will be down to 5, halved, 2.5. We round up, and that's going to be a 3. So the machine gun team, actually, it's only got a morale of 7. Less 3 is 4. So we've got 7, so we are 3 over, which means that unit will need to reform. Just need to check if the leader is hit from the casualties. It's a queen. It isn't, but if we had a specialist, it would. But we don't. It would need to be a king or a joker. So nothing there. This unit just withdraws slightly. That's the end of the turn. Right, new turn, and I had a better roll with 4 on the dice, +1 for an advance, that's 5, and I've issued a command from my commander. So 2 squads have moved forward there. I have moved 2 units the other side of the track, so that's 4. And I'm going to fire both of the Panzer IVs at that crane, or the British that are in that area. And I'm also going to combine the firing, and therefore it'll require 1 morale standard test, but we've got a combined impact. I rolled for a random event, nothing happened, so let's just go straight to the firing. So with the firing, it's a 9 for one of the tanks and 8 with the other, but it's also a hard cover, so therefore we deduct 2, so effectively we're down to 7s and 6s. 7 first, that's a hit, and the second is a miss. The impact of that, it's a heavy weapon, remember, so we add 1, so that would be well, +1 to this dice, but it's a -2 because we're behind heavy cover. So it's effectively a deduction of 1 from this dice, 1 being the minimum. 1 from this, so it's 4. So the impact is 4 on this unit. Its morale is 7, so we're down to 3. So how much above 3 do we get? We don't. It's 3. It's very dogged, and nothing happens. Unit's obviously made of stern stuff, so we're over to the British with the British turn. Done the testing offline, and the tank has gone temporarily bold. Everything else worked very well, so the unit which was temporarily measured has gone back to cautious. The unit which has always been cautious behind the sandbags remains so. The measured unit is, and both of the bold units both passed their test, so we'll certainly be firing from all 3. And then at the back there, the unit which had gone temporarily measured is back to cautious and is staying in its defensive position. So all good really for the British. Didn't have any random events, and there was no reserve, so we can go over to the shooting. Now I'll start with the anti-tank, the boy's rifle, firing at the Panzer IV, which is at the other end of the track here. Now, for those who know the period, the chances of them knocking it out I think are fairly slim, and for that reason the weapon is a light weapon and it's a heavy target. So we'll fire at it, see if we hit, and go from there. I was thinking of table 14.5 before I fire. I just need to make sure I don't draw a joker, and I don't. It's an 8 to hit, and it has. Alright, so it's a -1 because it's a light weapon, and a -2 because it's a heavy weapon, so it's a -3. In this circumstance, I'm going to say if we get a 3 or less, it just bounces off. We'll see if it makes any greater impact with this roll. Oh, it's a 6, so its impact is 3, so I'll have to take a test. Now the morale standard of this tank is 8. And then if I use the card, which I will do, I get a +2 for my morale. So 3 was the impact. Effectively using that card takes me down to an impact of 1. So it's 7 or less, but let's see what's happened from the roll. Double 1. Absolutely no problem at all. Next we're going to fire here at this unit. And let's just make sure that I can do. Effectively, it's anything but a joker, which will mean that it takes cover. It's not. It's a queen. This is the second time it's fired at the same target, and a 7 means that it's going to be a hit. 1d6 of impact, which is 4. Morale is 8. We're down to 4. Oh, crikey! It's 11. So if we're at 4, therefore it means it's going to be 7 above. Okay, 7 is a full retreat, so that means it's to fall back in disorder directly away from the enemy, 1 full move. Now is a leader hit in that process? No, there isn't. Now that unit moves back to here, however, I think reasonably, it's in line of sight of the troops who are part of that crane over there, and positioned around it. It's going to be within their arc of fire, so they'll fire at it as well. Need to make sure that they can. Yes, they can. Do they hit? Yes, they do. 1d6, which is a 6. Unit was on an 8, has lost 6, so it's 2. So how high above 2, if at all? Oh, not at all. No problem. And I don't roll for leaders being killed because effectively they're being fine and they haven't taken casualties after the getting the double 1. So at the end of turn 8, this is where we sit in the game. The virtual U forces are holding their own. My forces are making heavy weather of it,
getting pushed back. I haven't been lucky in terms of being able to advance particularly. I've had very low dice rolls, and then in terms of making any kind of firm impact in terms of firing, I haven't done anything with that either. So it's a long progress in terms of my troops. But in terms of the how to play game, I think I've covered all aspects of the game so far. So I'll play another couple of turns, see if things change considerably, and I'll not progress beyond an hour on the video. Hopefully it'll cover everything that you want with regards to understanding how to play. New turn and a change of fortune. I had a good roll with a 5. +1 in terms of movement is a 6, and I've also got a command. So just to say, I've moved 2 units, this one up to the door there. I've got this unit that's moved behind the building, so that's 2 over to the other side, and I've moved that panzer down. So we're going to take this station, so that's 3, and move these 2 units. That takes me up to 5. I'm going to fire with the tank. And I'm also going to fire with the mortar, which is the command from the command unit. I rolled to see if there was going to be a random event, and again there wasn't. So let's go straight to the shooting. Alright, I'm firing with this tank. The morale standard is 8, and that's in hard cover, so it would be a 6 to hit. So let's see how. There we go. Now that's a miss. Mortar is going to fire at this roof area again. Mortar's actually got a 9, and that's a hit. It's light, so we -1 on the roll, but it's a 6, so that's 5. Now the morale of the morale standard is 7. Lose 5, which takes us to 2. But I'm going to draw a card, or use the characteristic card, which is actually being a good cook. So it adds 1 to the morale standard, but that's only 3. Let's see how high above, if at all. It is 3. So it's no impact, and we're over to the British. Well, I've tested the British, and there's been lots of changes. So the tank has gone back to cautious. It didn't remain bold. The unit which I've got, the idea of that unit there, the one with the measured marker, it was originally cautious, and the idea is to go and get the agent and try and get them evacuated, but again it's failed, and so it's gone measured. Cautious unit there behind the sandbags remained so. The machine gun tub up here failed and has gone cautious, so now can't fire. Over on the other side, the unit at the back, the very back, remains cautious and it doesn't move. But the unit which is right next to the tank, which is behind the crane, that's now gone temporarily cautious, and the only unit which I can effectively use is the anti-tank weapon. Now, that's potentially useful to see if you can fire at the panzer, which is obscured on the screen because it's behind the crane, but I'm going to have a go at it if I can. Now, I've had a look at before any firing, I've had a look to see if there's a random event, and there isn't, so the only other thing I need to do is to have a look about any reserves, and for that we draw a card. But that is a disaster, and it's a disaster because if a joker is drawn, then all units designated in either reserves or flank troops are lost due to an ambush. So our second tank is lost. Now I'm going to say that the boys anti-tank has seen the panzer drive along the line on the other side of the crane, which you'll be able to see here, and I'm going to say we're going to be able to maneuver that so it can fire at it. It's being bold, so I'm going to say it's going to see if we can actually fire at it. Need to draw a card and make sure I don't get another joker, which I don't. I get a king. So I'm going to allow a shot to take place, and a 6 is going to be a hit. So it's a -1 because it is a light weapon, and I'm going to say it's also a -2 because it's a heavy target and a Panzer IV with armour, so I think it's reasonable to say it's a -3 we get 3 or less, it's no effect, otherwise it's, there will be some consequence, and it just bounces off, and so that's the end of the phase. Right, at this point I'm going to pause in the game. I've covered all aspects of what's going on in the game itself, even including a reserve unit being lost due to drawing a joker. Now, for those who really want to see what happens at the end of this game itself, I will do a third video so you can see it, and I'll play it right to its conclusion, but I don't want this video to go on beyond an hour. And ideally just wanted to cover everything in it so we could go through the chapter. Now in the book, for those who have it already, you'll see that there is an appendices with army lists and other thoughts in terms of miscellaneous ideas. I will mention that in the third video, but for this one I'll just finish it here and say thanks very much for everybody who's well, purchased the book, everybody who's watching this video, and thanks very much at Caliber Books for publishing. Had some really terrific feedback, and you know, everybody contributing to the Wargaming World solo Facebook group on the Wargaming World website, so that's www.wargamingworld.net, and indeed on this YouTube channel. So thanks once again everybody, and we'll speak again very soon.